Alrighty, so let's kick it off. So welcome everybody. We haven't got a big team today, so a few numbers, which is good. Maybe we'll get a kick on through this quite quickly and have plenty of time for questions. So hopefully you've got plenty of questions up your sleeves. Ready to go? Kirsty, can you just flick on the next slide?
Absolutely.
Well, look, here's a lovely photo. So you know who I am, Bruce Pike, I'm the account manager. We've got Kirsty there, some of you already met Kirsty.
Hey.
Sarah sitting next to Kirsty there, and Will. And our guest for today is Nick. Yep. Thanks for coming. Nick's from MYOB. So welcome. Wonderful.
Right, that's me, sorry.
Next slide, I think. Might be with you, Kirsty.
With me?
Yes.
What is job
So
costing?
I'll introduce Kirsty. Kirsty's from Invercargill. She may win the furthest travel today.
Oh, is there prizes? Please say it's chocolate.
Oh, Sheffield. Oh, well. You know, so Kirsty's based in Invercargill. She's part of the team that is responsible for Time Track. I think we heard a couple of uses of Time Track in the room. Time Track is for scheduling, maintenance, for people out in the field. Kirsty helps us with that application, help with the development team, and is going to talk to us about job costing.
Yeah,
Kirsty.
thank you. I will apologise in advance for my technical ineptitude. You'd think for somebody in an IT company I'd be able to figure out how to get the screens to work on these things, but no. So what is job costing? Essentially, nuts and bolts, nothing else. It is for capturing time and materials against a particular piece of work. Okay, so anybody that's got job costing, that's basically what they're trying to achieve. But as we all know, it actually has loads of stuff that we can do with it. It's a highly customizable piece of software. So I understand from Sarah that I need to minimize this one and this one. So go back into the slideshow. That one. Okay, someone else drive. Do we need to switch the screen? Possibly not.
It's fairly complicated because there are running a number of EXO databases on this machine.
Cool. Right. We'll run with this. Just going to shift that back a little bit so I can see what I'm doing. And I am cheating today. I have notes that I'm going to read off because I'm nervous. Okay? Okay. So the job costing module is an additionally licensed program that fully integrates with EXO Business. So there is quite a seamless integration in terms of the accounting process behind the scenes. It provides additional functions set around managing projects, entering quotes and estimates, accumulating time and costs, and invoicing via several methods. As a job progresses, time materials associated to that job are recorded. This information allows users to capture the projected costs and the actuals of each piece of work. So this, in any industry, is always a really tough thing to achieve. Job costing does this through lots of customization. It tracks the initial inquiry from your clients through to the completion and invoice of the job. You can have attributes like statuses, categories, types, dates, managers, which can be defined right down to the job levels, but also capture the greater picture of your organisation and how your jobs work. You can add documents, history notes, quoting, purchase orders. If you didn't know that, you can do that. So you can purchase your stock straight onto the job. A job will capture and accumulate the actual costs and sale values. Serialized stock can be used. Fantastic if you work with big things that you have to track long term for your clients. And jobs allow flexible invoicing, so you can invoice time and materials, so do the job, invoice it out, per a quote, via a billing schedule, so you know if you've got staged invoicing that you do, or via asset creation. Billing schedules allow for progress claims and pro forma invoices. It has a stock location called Work in Progress, or WIP, which I will go into a little bit more, which is tracked. And the WIP is automatically now integrated into the general ledger. So older versions of EXO, this wasn't part of EXO, but it is very much now in the current versions. You can have comprehensive reports which are created to monitor the progress of your jobs and analyse completed jobs. Anybody in a jobbing industry understands how important it is to see how profitable your jobs are after the job is done. And you can have formal documentation such as invoicing, quotes, and user-defined documents. So by user-defined documents, I'm talking about checklists that need to be completed off. If you work with government agencies, you may have forms that they require to have filled out and all those sorts of things. So job costing can have those being generated out of job costing. Anybody with time track will understand that we can do that separately from job costing, but save those documents into the jobs themselves anyway. Okay, so we've got job costing up in the screen. This is my screen here. And to be honest, to start with, a lot of what I'm going to show you isn't active, but I just wanted to get you in this screen to start with so that you can see I've got some jobs and things here. Most of you may have seen this screen already, and for those that haven't, this just gives you a quick overview of the work that you've currently got on the go. Right, now I will have to refer back to the thing because I think I'm jumping over now to my co-worker to discuss the quick points and cool tips and tricks. No, first I have to tell you what work in progress is. Right. Sorry, that was my bad. Work in progress. We often refer to this as WIP without the H generally. And we talk with WIP with you often. And I know from experience, and it's usually a year or so down the track, that a client says to me, what is WIP? What are you talking about? I have no idea what you're on about. Totally guilty of understanding it myself and not actually ever taking the time to communicate it with a client. So WIP is essentially a stock location. Okay, and what happens is that it's pretty much just a holding bay for your stock that is out on a job. From that point onwards, you can either return the stock back through a cancelled line into your stock count because it wasn't used on the job, or you can complete it through into an invoice and bill it out to the client based on the job. What WIP really gives us, though, is the ability to make sure that our stock on hand is accurate, because the stock that has physically gone out into the job is no longer countable in your stock tank. It gives you the ability to report upon the stock that's currently sitting out on site or being used on a job if you don't have sites that you go visit. So you can actually see in reporting what's being consumed on a job or is potentially being consumed on a job, because obviously what you invoice is not necessarily everything that's gone out. So WIP is an essential holding bay for your stock before you actually invoice out that stock onto your jobs. And that is what WIP is. So when we're referring to your WIP location, we're talking about the materials that are in WIP. It's really, really important that you understand what we're talking about, especially when we stress that you clear out the WIP location. Because quite often a job can get completed without everything actioned on a job, be it that you write the lines off, that's gone, you return the stock back into your stock count via a cancelled line, or you bill it out to the client. Otherwise, when you're running your WIP reports out of EXO, or your work in progress reports, you're going to show that you have a lot of value on your job still, even though they're completed. And that might not actually be accurate. You might have billed them like from a quote line or a progress bill or something like that. So again, WIP is an actual physical thing that we need to account for, and it needs to be routinely maintained, just like any other stock location.
So, Kirsty, can I just ask a question there?
Yeah.
So is that sort of like a common problem that you're encountering when you're talking to our clients?
It's a constant.
They haven't taken it out of work.
Yeah.
They do exactly what you just said not to do.
Yep. And what it will do is it'll give you an inflated sense of what your value of your stock is, or an incorrect, analysis of the value of your stock, because it's classed as a stock location. So it means that it's thinking you've actually got the stock. What might have happened, though, is that you've actually already consumed it on the job, and it's not actually in stock. It just hasn't been billed because your billing model, your invoicing model, may not have captured it all in. So every time you run a report to judge whether or not you've still got stock sitting in a job or in progress, then it's, or work in progress, even better, then obviously your reporting is not going to be accurate. You're not going to be able to judge whether or not you're truly, having a profit out of each of your jobs, because it's going to think you've still got, value in your stock sitting on a job.
It's stock on hand is generally an asset in the balance sheet, and work in progress is just a sub-categorisation of the asset. So you are actually inflating the value of your assets by holding on to WIP in the balance sheet when it should have been cancelled or written off or attached to a progress invoice. So it can really alter the impact of your financial accounts if you don't deal with it properly.
And now you can see why I have my GL superstar.
Does that resonate with anybody? Or made that mistake before? Any question for me?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because that is a definite issue, but
yeah.
The problem is that you've got lots of staff doing stuff and you don't know what they've done wrong, and so now you've got a whole lot of stock sitting in work. And my problem is they either have to track back to every job and fix it, or how can I do it easy ways?
Really good question. Yes.
How can you do it easy?
Yes. Jibe is an easy tool for that, in that it gives you a giant overview of your jobs and you can manage it within a single screen, but I'll let Will delve deeper into that one. But without Jibe, you're going to rely very heavily on your reporting, and Focus can customize your reporting to look at, say, a job status of completed or to be invoiced or something like that, so that your list is much, much shorter, that you're dealing with those jobs that do have outstanding WIP stock counts versus, maybe just a general job report, which might not give you quite the filtering that you need to return just the results that you need.
There's another option as well,
yeah.
Which is just like say, so it's kind of like a retrospective and a proactive version. So
yeah.
Business alerts themselves.
Yes, yes, business alerts.
So I'm going to mention about business alerts later on. So a very powerful feature of the system.
Fantastic. Great. Yep. So far we've come up with business alerts, reporting, and Jibe. So we can definitely handle it, but any industry that works in job costing has at some point generally found that they've got things on a job that they don't want there or that shouldn't be there. So yeah, we welcome that conversation with you so that we can make sure that your businesses are running cleanly, for lack of a better description there. Right, so I'm going to pass over to my esteemed colleague, Will.
Hi everyone. So I'm not going to actually be looking at the PowerPoint directly because you've got them in front of you, and I think it's probably nicer if I show you just quickly the screens that I'm talking about in EXO, which is, it helps if I look at the one in front of me. So I was just going to talk about some of the quick tools, and these are, the first one is actually available everywhere in job costing or in EXO. Oh, that's lovely. So in job costing, but also in standard EXO and in CRM, there is a task scheduler which allows you to set up appointments, schedule that you're using a resource. So you can say, I've got something booked out for a job. We could use it to schedule staff or equipment. But we can also use it to set up opportunities, campaigns, meetings, and these can all be synced through into Outlook if that's something that's useful for your business. And one of the good features of it is that if you've got someone who's in charge of setting your meetings or service coordination, they can go through and do that to other staff members. So that's just one of those quick, neat things there. Yes.
Work both ways. It only go what we set and here as a task goes through to Outlook, not convert, not the other way.
We can get it to go both ways. So there's an option in the EXO config for what task types. You'll set a little flag and it'll sync everything that's got that flag from Outlook back and forth. So if you want it to go both ways, it can. The one thing I'll say is that you have to actually have someone click the button each day to make it sync back and forth. But it can definitely bring that information from Outlook if you want to set that up. So yeah, that's a great question. Thank you, Christian. So the other quick thing in this main screen is recent items, which is just what it says. It's a quick list of screens you've been in recently. And obviously this is a demo database, so I've only been in one screen, but I can go straight to the cash sales account by clicking on it here. So it's quite useful if you've been doing a bunch of things. Yeah.
Sorry. Is that supposed to track a whole week? Because I find every time I log off and log in, it sort of starts fresh.
I will need to grill my friend Nick about that a little bit. It used to track everything forever, and that caused a problem with MYOB. So they changed it, and I know your business, because I've talked to Alex on your behalf,
Yes.
is having an issue where for some reason yours isn't tracking a whole week, but usually it tracks a whole week. So,
Sorry, just can you repeat the question?
oh, sorry.
Just the microphones are picking up your audio very well.
Oh, sorry about that. So the question there was, is the recent item supposed to track a whole week? And the answer is yes. If it's not, that's something you should talk to us about, and if we can't figure it out, we'll have to talk to MYOB, who today is in the form of Nick. And the earlier question was about syncing information back from Outlook, which we can do. There are some settings in Outlook and in EXO config that go back and forth. So I'm just going to quickly click through to my next slide, which is talking about direct time entry. So there's this direct entry option here for direct material entry or direct time entry just below it. And this is a great screen if I'm doing a whole bunch of work on multiple jobs. So I can just come in here and I can say, oh, excellent. So job code 10. Sorry for the beeping. But as you can see, it's really quick for me to just go through, and I can enter everything that I've been handed on all the different job sheets against all the different jobs without having to go into a bunch of different screens for each of those jobs. So, you know, it's really useful for someone who's bulk entering data. And there's the same version for timesheets, direct time entry just below it. So I should stop looking at the screen because I realise I'm supposed to stare at the camera. So Kirsty already showed quickly the plan and maintain jobs screen, which is just the big overview screen. But you can see that it's got lots of search options up the top here, so it's actually really quite easy for me to go drilling for different parts of the jobs. And there's an extensive search option as well. We can add extra fields to the search. It is quite a good way to get a quick overview of your jobs. And dashboards, probably the last thing I'll be talking about at the moment. Yep. The dashboards are an option. Now these dashboards have been getting rolled out by MYOB to more and more places in EXO. They started in jobs, and they're a really neat way to see a bunch of information. So you can set up little reports, or well, usually there's little reports that just bring through the information you need to know about where you are. So you can do this on a debtor, you can do this on a sales order, you can do this in a job to see exactly how much cost has gone in, how much profit you're supposed to be making, what you've quoted and what you've invoiced. So that's a default one. If you want that tweaked to match your business a little bit more, we can do that. If you've got something else that you think, I just really need to see this information, this is a great little screen we can just add things to. I click up here, I can stick an extra widget in. Obviously I picked the wrong one because it's not very pretty. No, it's telling me that the quota's expired. and it'll tell me if something's exceeded or over budget. It's actually quite a nice one. So that is it for my quick tips for the moment.
Thanks, Will. Any questions?
Check.
I've got a question.
Yes?
I was just going to say, on direct timesheets and direct materials,
Yes?
do you want to mention about the copy and paste?
There is that's an excellent thing, and I should have thought about that. So you can just copy and paste into their screen. So if you've got everything filled out in an Excel spreadsheet, you can just copy the whole spreadsheet and paste it straight into here, and it will just fill out line by line. We've used that successfully ourselves to set up whole job quotes. So you can use that in quite a few of the screens through job costing.
So you only need the job code and stock code fields.
You need those, but I can have that in my spreadsheet. So I could have a spreadsheet that had 10 columns. Just copy the spreadsheet, so I don't have to retype it from the spreadsheet if somebody else has entered it on a spreadsheet.
So we used to actually use it internally for our timesheets, and I'd have exactly the same thing on the top of the spreadsheet with, the jobs that I've done, and so I've been, based on those columns, you just copy and then right click on the top and it goes paste columns and it just drops straight into that. So it's a very quick method.
And just to sort of extend what we're talking about, you can also do this in the quote budget tab. So if you're building your quotes and things and they're complex and got layers, you can do that in the quote budget tab of the job as well. You have a template in Excel that you can then bulk import into your quotes, edit as required.
Can you do that on the quote tab in CRM versus just job costing?
It's a great question, Graham. I'll check for you.
Okay.
So thank you very much. You'll notice in your slides that there's a fun fact. And if I can get the slideshow back up, you can all find out about when you turn 100.
I wonder how they came up with that. Oh, you got to stop at 99.
No more Legos.
No more Legos.
So I'll hand over to Sarah because she's up to talk to you about job costing and how it interacts with the general ledger. Just a thrilling topic that we all need to know about.
Yes, absolutely. Now we've had quite a lot of inquiry around this sort of the setup required for GL and for just basically people just want an explanation of what they're posting, why does it go to a particular location and when does it go there. So we thought we'd cover that off. You all will have a handout in your pack that's related to what I'm going to speak on today because I'm giving you a lot of information, but it's not something that it's probably going to matter much until you go back to the office and have a look and start poking around in your system just to see where things are, what things are happening. Now I just need to switch the databases here, so just bear with me for a moment please. So what I'm going to cover today for a start is the main configurations that you can set up within EXO that determine where job costing transactions post into your general ledger. The first setting that determines the GL outcome from job costing is whether or not you're on periodic or perpetual inventory. Now you'll see that on your handout there is an explanation of the difference of the two. And I'm just going to quickly duck into EXO config and show you where you can review this information within your system. There's a screenshot of it on your handout, but hopefully this is where it lives basically. So you can see here it's just a tick box, and the system that we're looking at today is perpetual. Now I have to caution everyone very strongly that changing these settings without reviewing the change with one of our software consultants will likely result in problematic GL transactions and stock postings, and that will make them pretty unreconcilable. So if you have a look at your stock status and you think, I actually want to be on perpetual and I'm on periodic, that transition sort of has to be undertaken with us, and so that we can get your stock correct to begin with, and we can transition you to the new system and make sure that it stays reconcilable. And it's a really important thing for your end of financial year accounts that these transactions are posted and the accumulation of stock in your balance sheet is done correctly. Now, one of the most noticeable differences that end users will see will be where stock on hand is in the financial reports. In a periodic environment, you'll see opening and closing stock in the direct cost section of the P&L, and the difference being the cost of goods sold. So the subtraction of one from the other in the P&L is the value of your cost of goods sold. Whereas in the perpetual stock environment, stock on hand is in the balance sheet with the cost of goods sold being calculated on a per transaction basis. So it takes the cost of the stock as it's brought into your system, it follows that through to the point where it's invoiced, and it does the sale price less the cost price. That's your cost of goods sold. Due to the fact that periodic inventory systems don't post every transaction through to the general ledger, we're just going to have a look at perpetual today. To begin with, the type of stock item you are transacting with determines a large part of what gets posted to the GL. There are 3 types of stock in your system, so I'm just going to pop into maintain. I'm just going to review them. I've set these up so that they can be so that we can have a look at them today. You won't have these stock items. So the first thing we're going to look at is a lookup stock item. And you can just see that in the flag section, it's just got a tick in the lookup box. So a lookup stock item is a non-stocked stock item. So for example, your labour that you put on jobs is a non-stocked stock item. That a lookup only stock item doesn't record a cost. So it's not going to post any costs through the GL, it's only going to post its sale. The next type we're going to look at is a lookup recoverable stock item, which is, you can see it's got a tick in the lookup box, but it's also got a tick in the recoverable box. So this is the same as before. It's a non-stocked stock item, but it does post a cost. So you can see the cost section over here. You determine the cost. The average cost is not calculated. It's a field that you can overtype, unlike your primary stock items where you can, the average cost is a calculation, and to change that you'd have to do the average cost adjustments. And then the last type is a recoverable stock item, which is just your normal type of stock. So it's things that you buy in and then sell out at a percentage margin increase or something along those lines. You see that the average cost box here is, can you see that it's grey as opposed to white? That means that it's a calculated field and that we can't overtype it. The next important setup on each stock item is over here in details 2. Now you've got ledger posting profiles here, and they determine where transactions are posted into the GL. So this is the really important section here. Now when you've set up a stock item, it gets these codes from somewhere. That they can be changed with the exception of the purchases clearing GL code on recoverable stock items, but they inherit their ledger posting profiles from your GL control accounts. Now, are any of you familiar with your GL control accounts set up and config? Yes, so that's what determines where things get posted and where those defaults are set against your stock items. So we're just going to flick back to EXO Business. You can see that this is just a standard. I haven't changed anything, and it's got its sales GL code set to sales and its cost of sales GL code set to the cost of sales. If we have a look back in here, we can see that those 2 accounts are the defaults in the GL controls account section. If these were to change and we were to set up new stock items, they would inherit the new ones, but we can also change them in here. Now that we've gone through the different stock types and briefly described each one, we're going to go through the transaction types in job costing and demonstrate how they use the GL ledger accounts and what the posting outcome of each is. Now you will see on the handout, I believe it's on the very last page, there's quite a lengthy explanation of the different stock types and the different transaction types within job costing. So you've got adding lines to a job as a transaction type, writing lines off, cancelling lines, invoicing a job, and creating an asset. Now, is anyone here familiar with the create asset function within EXO? So what that is it's used when you buy stock in and then you modify it in some way, and you can use a job to record those modifications, and at the end of the job, instead of invoicing it, you use the create asset function, and that generates new stock items for you and inserts them into your stock on hand. So if you do that, if you have internal processes around that where you're sort of modifying an existing stock item and you want it to have a different stock code at the end of the process, you can use the job costing function for that. And the create asset is really create stock item, and we have to talk to Nick about why it's called the wrong thing.
So is there any particular industry that uses it, Sarah?
I see manufacturing is very strong for it, particularly in engineering, where perhaps they get a length of pipe in and they have to turn it into some pre-formed shape. So they'll have a certain amount of time allocated for bending and welding and things like that, and then at the end of the process, they might do 50 at once as a batch, and then they just create those new 50 stock items, and it deals with all the costs and the posting and everything like that. It just creates them as a new stock item, and then that allows you to then use them again without having to, on an every job basis, say, I've got this much labour and this much welding rod and everything like that as a part of this job. So it's, yeah, and it's used especially if workshops have like a quiet time or some downtime and they want to give their staff something to do, but it's got to be measurable. You know, they just don't want them mucking around. So they do.
That sounds like a really good thing.
Yeah. So
I can explain why it's called create asset.
yes.
So it's used for, like say, various different applications, and the asset is basically because stock is an asset, or it could potentially, if we're building an actual piece of machinery, even though it's a piece of stock, it may be tracked based on fixed assets as well. So it might even be a serviceable unit that you then create and you can service that asset. The other thing that's quite notable as well is that you can create multiple assets as well. So I used to be, back in the day, I used to be a welder fabricator. So we get a sheet of metal and then put it into different pieces. We make actually 4 or 5 different assets. So you can actually create multiple assets from that single sheet and then roll those different stock items into stock. So you're still using, it took me 2 hours to make all of these things, but I've actually made 6 different items. So you actually make 6 different items.
That's good to know.
We could use that instead of using kit codes, because we have a valve that has like a couple of O-rings and an actuator and it's 5 or 6 pieces, but it's sold as one part.
Yeah.
We're currently doing a kit code for that, so it's bringing through because the parts do actually come in individually and the guys make them up, so that every month to be able to track the cost. So the cost of those items go up, the cost of the solid item also goes up.
Yeah.
Or would you say that using assets would be better?
Oh no, I think kit codes in that situation is good use. It's just if you're adding any labour component to it, it makes that just a lot more straightforward, particularly if you've got a system like Time Track that automatically puts time onto jobs and things like that. You already got that recording of information happening. So yeah, but yeah, kit codes will still work in a situation where it's component only. All right, so I've set up these test jobs for all different things. You can see that I've quite handily named them what I need to call them. This is just, and I'm really just going to go through and just post very quickly on each one. I'm just going to post each type of stock item once, and then we're going to post to the GL so that you can see the outcome on that GL level. Look up. Now I learnt when I was demoing these things that you put your cost price in different, so it's not the same on every stock item, so that when we post through to the GL that we can see the actual different stock items coming through. So just going to save that. Now that's just adding lines to a job. You'll all be familiar with that, whether you do that in this screen or whether you do it in the bulk entry screen that Will used earlier, or whether you use Time Track or Timesheet Manager to assign stock to a job. This is all where it ends up essentially. So if we just hop back into here, we go to our end of month, we post our ledgers, and we just run a new post run. I'm using all unposted, and that's what I recommend, but not everyone does it. So then we can just have a look at this, and this is just telling us what everything's posted to. So the $68.60 is our recoverable stock item, and the $60 is our lookup recoverable stock item. And because our lookup stock item doesn't post a cost, it's not showing anything here. It does bother me that EXO shows the credit side of the entry before the debit side, but that's just an accountant thing, I think. Yeah, it does give me a bit of an eye twitch. But you can see it's posting based on the accounts that are set up against your GL control accounts and also against your stock items. Now it posts through to work in progress. We alluded to that earlier. It's not just a separate stock location, it is a different GL code, and it ought to be as well. I've seen systems where stock on hand and the work in progress account have been set up to the same account, and I think that's just a sort of a bit of a confusion of the information. Work in progress should be reconcilable, so we can run reports for you, put reports in place for you where the value of your work in progress can be broken down to every single line on every single job that's at a work in progress or ready to invoice status. They will be what makes up your work in progress. So it's pretty straightforward, but that's just one of the sort of connections that sometimes people don't automatically make, is that's what results in the work in progress in your balance sheet, is the addition of lines to jobs at work in progress or ready to invoice status. They are the value of your work in progress in your balance sheet. So that's just a wee connection you can draw now. So you can see that's what's been posted, the purchases account, and that was, we can just quickly just tick back into our stock item and show you to look up recoverables. So that's that purchase account set up there. Now we can go back out of here and we can just create asset, just to give you a wee demonstration of what's going on here. So we've got, I've pre-added the lines to these ones because I was trying to be ready for anything. So we send those all to the invoice section, which moves us down to the invoice tab, and then we've got create asset here. So we're just going to create a single asset, which means it's just going to be one stock item. It's not us making that noise, is it? No. It's just going to be one stock code that we're generating. We're just going to say that this obscure list of codes is what makes up some alloy wheels. And it just asks you quantity, and we're going to say, yep, that actually made 5. And then it gives you the date, the age, and all that sort of fun stuff. We go, okay. Or do we? Pardon? Oh yes, sorry. We're going to put it into Auckland. And it's just saying you're going to create 5 of these at this cost price, and we say, yes, please. We're going to hook back over to our post ledgers. So you can see the cost of the lines being removed from work in progress here and here, and then the combination of that being added back into stock on hand. If we were now to go back into the stock, find the stock item that we added, we made some alloy wheels. I think it was these ones. Was it these ones, Kirsty? Yeah, you can see that we didn't make 35 of them, did we? 25 of them. Yeah, so there's
Thanks, Sarah.
That's that coming in there. But you'll see there's a breakdown. You'll see that there's on your handout, there is a breakdown of all the transaction types against all of the stock items or the stock types, and you can just, if you're ever curious, I guess, how a transaction is going to affect your GL, you can look in there and you can see it gives you an explanation of where it obtains the debit side of the transaction, the code, where it obtains the credit side, and where it obtains the value from. So it's pretty straightforward, sort of a breakdown of the information, and it's just there now for your reference point. What have I got there?
Any questions? Any questions?
So like Janine was saying, I mean, if you've physically got a whole lot of stock items like a valve or something, and you've got O-rings and whatnot, and they're actually assembled into the thing, and they're never going to be disassembled, that would kind of be better than kits, because you can't go and sell that O-ring on its own anymore.
Yeah.
So is that the way you would?
So just going to repeat this for the Invercargill people, it's just a question about, again, kits versus the use of the create asset function. And Christian's just rightly pointed out that when you're using kits, it does appear that the stock is still available to be used on other things, when in actual fact it has been consumed within the use of that kit. It's really up to you and the processes that you want to follow. We've got a lot of people that sort of generate kits sort of in advance and things like that, so that they don't sort of have that issue as such. But when you feel like that might be a risk, or that you don't, you want to have that stock consumed and completely unavailable, yeah, absolutely use the create asset function. It's really quick, and like you can sort of pre-can a job, so you can have it set up that it can be duplicated if you've got a standard set of lines that you want to use as a sort of to generate a batch, and you can do that relatively quickly, and it posts it all through to the GL.
So just the one thing I'd say that's a big difference from the GL is that if we're using the create asset and creating an advance, it's going to use the cost that it has at that time. Whereas if you're using a kit, then if the cost of one part of it goes up suddenly, in future you're going to be using that new cost, or the average of the new cost. So that's the one thing I'd be aware of.
But if you are physically making a stock item and putting it back on the shelf, then you want the cost to be what was actually at the time. So there's a lot of factors to consider, and it's just basically comes down to what's going to best reflect the needs of your business.
I would definitely say it comes down to building warranty as well, because if like Sarah says, if you're manufacturing and that's what you generally do, and then you sell the finished item, then bill of material, the kit is used for bill of materials, and then you create the assets. Whereas if you're more in the nature of, if you're doing like fitting windows or something like that, you use a kit to determine what you've actually got, and then you actually invoice it out. So you wouldn't actually create an asset. You just generate the invoice based on, this is my kit, and then you bill via that. So it kind of is based on whether you pre-manufacture or, these are all the items they're going to use, and I bill this. So that's
Thanks, Nick.
For the components that made up that asset, did you say that the cost comes from each of those components?
Yes.
It's not the cost on that job cost line at the time?
The cost on the job cost line generally comes from the stock item, and depending on what you've got set up, averages.
That to be, for whatever reason, different, would it use that cost when it generates the asset and assigns that?
Yes, yeah, it would, yes. So, if there's no other questions, I'll finish, but before I finish, I'll quickly, very nicely switch back over to Kirsty's.
I've got a question for you.
Absolutely.
The difference between perpetual and periodic, is one used more than the other? Is that what you find? Or are they different sectors, different markets?
It's more of a different business. So sorry for the Invercargill people. That was just a question about how frequently we see periodic and how frequently we see perpetual stock. It's more about what the business itself wants to track. I'm a big fan of perpetual stock because it gives you a constant overview of what you have available, and it gives you the ability to track stock on a live basis, whereas with periodic you're only sort of posting your stock value at the end of the month, and if there's any significant sort of losses or gains or anything like that, you're only getting visibility over that when you post that at the end of the month, and perhaps even then you're not investigating it as thoroughly as what you might. But with perpetual stock, because every stock transaction is posting through to the GL and you're getting basically a profitability on every stock entry, it gives you a much better overview of that, and it keeps everything a lot more live and fresh. Yes, that's why I prefer perpetual stock. I've kind of got a little bit of a bee in my bonnet about inventory and stock being one of the biggest problems in businesses today, in that it's not tracked very well and that it's very difficult to put those systems in place around your staff and how they record things on jobs and everything like that. But if you're not using a perpetual stock system, you're already sort of cutting out a lot of the investigating and the tick-off points that you can give yourself in terms of doing reconciliations on that information. So, yeah, I could talk all day, but I won't. I'll finish up and I'll pass back over to Kirsty.
Right. Before I get started, what time was planned for morning tea?
About 10:15.
Sweet. I'll get up so that I look a whole lot taller than I really am. Yes, sorry. Sense of humour. I'm a nerd. Okay, I will go back to my attempt to go back to my slide. I used the word attempt. Oh, because the fun fact. I'm sure we've all had that discussion with our friends and things about, if you could have somebody to dinner who was famous and hard to get a hold of, i.e. dead, Albert Einstein would be my guy. I would love to sit there and talk to him forever. He's cool. Okay. Customized job costing with Kirsty. Oh, and yep, you can all see what great. So as I alluded to earlier, job costing out of the box is a fairly simple sort of module, and it does require customization to match just about any business that we have. There's not many that we use job costing straight out of the box. Any consultant who sort of sets up job costing for a client that says, we only need the basics, discover 6 months down the track, that's never the basics. So job costing can meet the needs of service delivery, manufacturing and construction organisations. That kind of covers most of the industries, really, that would use jobbing. And focus work with our clients to make sure that their job costing does work for their businesses. And quite often it's the little things that catch everybody out. We start out with our scoping processes and we think we get a good idea, and then 6 months down the track you'll come out with something left field for that one thing that we do that's critical, but job costing currently doesn't meet. So please talk to us about those things, because we're always happy to help you meet those needs within your jobbing industries. Okay, some of the ways that we customise job costing: extra fields. Quite often your industry will need extra information that's just unique to your business, that's important to your reporting, important to your transactionally behaving, to your transactions. And they can be calculated fields as well. Okay, so we can take information from other fields, sale prices, margins, those sorts of things, and produce calculated fields, extra fields, giving you more information. We have the ability to rename or add existing columns to your search screens, and Will showed you that with the extensive search you can include them into your filtering in those search screens and job costing. What we can do in job costing, we can mirror across our other search fields, so your data transactions, your sales orders, purchase orders, all those sorts of things. That behaviour is across the product. We can put in SQL triggers which can add or manipulate the data behind the scenes. So we often have that, especially in jobs, because quite often you might have a behaviour of where a job some information hits a job and we want to automatically change it through to a new status or update the categories or do some shifting of the lines and things like that. So we can actually get quite clever. Just to give you a working example, I'm going to pick on poor Graham here. We've recently added in some customization around documentation and shifting it between an external product and job costing, making it very easy for his team to save documents. We haven't gone live with it yet, but it looks awesome in testing. Basically push it through into the external product and then pull it back into job costing again once the guys are done with it. So this is all through customization. This is actually quite advanced. Job costing reports. Now, quite often job sites don't have enough reporting to give them the true details that they need on their job costing sites. And quite often you don't know what kind of reporting that you need. The only way that we can really establish the kind of reporting you need is getting a consultant out on site so that they can have a look at the gaps, okay, in what you need. You know, and quite often management don't actually get the proper overview of where their businesses are at. We can create custom forms like invoices and quotes. Not sure if you're aware of the fact that you can have more than one. Okay, so you can have one layout dependent, you know, an invoice or something like that that would suit a particular customer, or they may have a standard that they require because they might have, you know, scanning and stripping data or something like that from the invoices. So we can have an invoice just for them, an invoice for everybody else. You could have quotes and different layouts and things depending on how complicated your quoting gets. And we can customize those forms for you so you can actually start delivering your formatted forms out appropriately. And finally, and this is probably the most critical step in customizing job costing, is us working through your business process with you. The way that we do things, the way that we at Focus and as a consultant go through the system, I have learned the hard way, is not the way that you go through it. Okay, your steps will be different. You'll have found the quickest way to suit your business. So it's really important that we understand how you need to get your data in, how you need to get your data out, and making sure that you have the best tools that you need to get that done quickly. Because let's face it, any time keen and data is arduous.
And you'll all probably use job costing very differently, even though it's the same product. Each one of you here, each business will be utterly different even if you're in the same industry, and that you will end up using job costing quite distinctly differently. And yeah, it's a very customizable and adaptable program.
Sorry. Did I warn you that I'm not good at this? Fantastic. It's a good thing we have gurus here. Right, how are we for time? Okay.
You've got another 5 minutes, so.
I think I can squish in serviceable units.
Great. Who's using serviceable units, by the way?
Anybody using serviceable units?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of you. Fantastic.
If you didn't know, serviceable units are in Time Track.
Okay. So what are they?
Okay. Serviceable units are also an extra module which is purchased and embedded into MYOB, EXO and job costing seamlessly. While this is a fairly simple module out of the box, it is actually quite powerful when it comes to capturing work completed against a unit. Serviceable units can be used as a company-owned item and charged out to the clients, like work trucks, heavy machinery, and then I've got otherwise known as job resources. Okay, so basically they're big things that you would normally add into the cost of a job. Okay, so if you have a piece of equipment like a HIAB or something like that that gets used, that can be a job resource in a serviceable unit. Now the serviceable unit can have maintenance run against it, and to look at a serviceable unit, they look very, very simple out of the box. But actually I'll finish the blurb and then I'll show you some serviceable units. I think it's probably the best way moving forward. They can be rented out items, okay, so they can be owned by an organisation and rented or leased out to clients, and each serviceable unit, like I said, can have a running history against it. So to give you an example of a rented out item, a photocopier that, you know, your client doesn't necessarily own, but they are leasing it off you, and you will do constant maintenance against that, and you want to track not just the unit itself and the maintenance that's been done, but also the jobs and the clients that it's been assigned to. Okay, so a serviceable unit captures that information. A serviceable unit can also be the unit in itself. Okay, that's something that the client does own. So it can be out on the client's site, and you want to run a history against it on every time you've visited, the parts and materials that you've used, whether or not it's something that gets to a point where it needs to be replaced, if you have, you know, a limit of hours against it or something like that, or quantity of copied things that have to happen, then that can be recorded, tracked. And, you know, from an organisational point of view, big scheme of things, your customer service goes up and you are proactive, because you are tracking the life of that unit, and you are addressing your clients before they ring you up and say, it's broken, I hate it and I want a new one. And you've lost, you know, your ability to sell them a new one. You can see that it's approaching the end of its life or something like that, and you can say, hey, look, we can see that you're coming to your end of life for your product. Can we interest you in a new product?
Tony, you put your hand up as using serviceable units. I think, give us an example of your serviceable units. How do you use it?
Ours are used on customer sites with the systems that we install.
So this is alarm systems?
Yeah, so alarm systems and access control and things like that. And we use it as scheduling preventive maintenance. So within the serviceable units you can assign that it comes up periodically in the monthly reports that it's coming up due for its preventive maintenance. It's then a trigger for the service manager to get in contact with the client, say that your alarm's due for this.
Time to schedule some
the text and go and do the maintenance on it.
Yep.
Excellent example of proactive customer service. Yeah.
Probably more of the fitnesses with places with access controls, council requirement.
Right.
That they have maintenance agreements and that it's maintained on a regular basis and the warrant signed off, so we have to be proactive in making sure that we're meeting our obligations so the client can continue to operate.
Mm.
Yeah, we've got a similar customer who, well, not so similar, but they do gas installations and maintenance of gas-based systems, and they have a similar requirement around commercial sites where they have to be maintained or inspected on a regular basis. And what they found was, even when they said, you know, to the customer that it was their responsibility, the onus was on them to schedule that maintenance, it was falling through the cracks, a lot of it. So they switched on serviceable units for that exact reason, so that those businesses remain compliant with the law and don't have to close down.
It's a big deal.
Anybody else want to add to serviceable units?
I have another example that's a little bit different and possibly maybe thought-provoking, hopefully. We have a client that uses serviceable units that represents golf carts. Now, these can be both owned by the client and rented out. So we're covering two quite different business models for them, two quite different billing models. They can be assigned to many golf courses over the length of their life, the golf cart. They do need parts, they do need time. So they get assigned to the job, and they can have their parts and time associated to the serviceable unit in job costing. So what this means for the golf cart organisation is that they can track exactly how much time and materials that their guys are using on their serviceable units. So I will demonstrate that aspect of job costing. And
so if one golf cart, for instance, required a lot of maintenance, so a lot of run an analysis report.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're absolutely.
That brand was bad.
Kill the slideshow.
Yeah, true.
And of course, you know, a golf cart can be purchased and sold again as well. So that, you know, organisation might say, well, look, we're upgrading everything because we're going to the next level, or we've got a big, you know, international golf tournament on or something like that, and we want big new flash things. So this company will then rebuy that stock and turn it into a leased item. So they need to keep, those serviceable units need to keep track of all of that to make sure that they are, the whole profitability of that item is captured. Now I am not in job costing. But look at that, magic, nailed job costing. For anybody who's talked to me on the phone before, I really am as goofy in real life as I am on the phone. You thought you'd get away with it. Okay, so I have a copier job here as my example. Against that I have my serviceable unit assigned. Now I could have many serviceable units to use, obviously not a copier company, but my golf carting example, they often go out to a golf course, being the job, and they will have 15 units assigned to it. Now when they put their time in for the guys, because we have serviceable units here, and this is really important for them, they can see on the line which cart, or in this case which copier, they've worked against. And you can imagine in their reporting, especially, you know, user productivity, what materials have been used for each cart, this is now quite detailed for this client. In the past, they weren't able to truly capture this information. And likewise, where I have used materials, I can say which copier those materials have been used on. Is there any questions?
If you bought in, say you bought in 10 plastic feeders and that was to go against 3 or 4 different copiers.
Yeah.
So you would actually split that against multiple jobs then, wouldn't you be? Because each copier would be a job. Okay.
No, in this instance, the job is the client. Yeah, and the copiers are the serviceable units. Yeah.
But you're right, it can go the other way and the job can be the serviceable unit.
And you can capture the time and materials on that. So you're not incorrect. It's just a slightly different model.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now the serviceable unit in themselves, if we drill into this one, it has a whole bunch of things that you can assign to it. And these can all be renamed to match what your units are actually going to be. So you may not have classes, makes and models, but in this case they're basically an ability to identify your units. Okay, so to go back to our copier companies, these may not be motor parts items, they would be the model number, they might be, you know, you might have for a copier company the really big machines versus a desktop machine versus, you know, something that's in between, you know, handheld scanners. So all of these are useful for reporting and identifying. We can link them back to an actual stock item, and then it involves a stock transaction. And if it belongs to a stock item with a serialized, you know, that is serialized, we can assign the serial number against that. So again, if we're using big pieces of machinery or things that are going out that are serialized, then we can start capturing all of those links. It can belong or not to a customer, i.e. owned by the customer, but serviced. You can view contacts, so that's your customer's contacts, but the contact history is actually the history of the serviceable unit. If you have time track, we can write back a contact history note each time the guy saves a time entry against it. So that's just something else that's automated. You can see every job in the serviceable history that unit has belonged to. So this is where you start building up your history of your item.
This is where we get from the job you mentioned earlier, because now you can sell it between customers, whereas it's hard to move a job between customers.
And maintain that history, yeah. Yeah. Notepad is the usual function of Notepad, scheduling it out, and of course documents, really important now for serviceable units. Most serviceable units, especially if they are things like a golf cart or something that's got details, you can now put in things like your explosion diagrams of the parts and things like that. You can have any sort of correspondence, legal, you know, leases and things like that that belong to that unit, not just assigned to the debtor account, but to the unit itself.
for example, Tony, you'll probably have a checklist for each site you go to visit for access control, and you may want to save it against the salvageable unit.
It is. He's about to ask a quick question in that documents now. I know you can drag and drop from Outlook to create a document in there. Can that please be done with Data Explorer?
Yeah, so, okay.
We'll have to upgrade you.
Yeah. So thank you so much for your time so far, but it's morning tea.
Yep.
So we'll let you all go.
Head outside, to your right, it's tea, coffee, so if you can't any handouts. Well, you're going to run straight to drive now. We've got a couple of other slides here too.
It's okay, we can follow up.
Sorry about that. So, what I will do is just thinking my way quickly around a problem.
Can we put it in?
I'll need to quickly install it. Does someone else want to take questions for a minute while I quickly play with something?
Actually, what I can do is cover progress billing.
Yes.
So I just want to close out of that website.
Oh, I'm turned off screen sharing for a minute.
Cool. Okay, so progress billing. Why would you use it? Progress billing is really mostly for your quota projects. Okay? So quota projects tend to be broken into stages, and those stages are often what you would bill out. So the progress invoice lines can be entered into the job either via the quote budget tab and then converted into a invoice, or they can be entered in directly into the billing schedules tabs. That's two different tabs in job costing. As time and materials are used up on the job, in the timesheets and costs tabs, they can be assigned to the correct progress invoice. So what this allows you to do, because it doesn't change the value of the invoice, but what it does do is move your stock and assign it to the invoice, and it allows you to capture the true costs and profits, obviously from your invoice to the actuals that are used up on a job. So anybody that works in a projecting type sort of work, quite often what they invoice out to the client is quite different to what they actually time and materials get spent on the job. Okay, because you'll have an agreement with the client generally for progress billing, and it will allow you to track the stages of the job, and it will allow you to report finally on the end of the job on what it's actually cost you to complete the job. Now this is fantastic because quite often people can't do this in a jobbing site. They can't accurately go at the end of a job and say it truly cost us this much, including the cost of your materials at the time, and we made this much of a profit. But not only at the end of the job can you do this with progress billing, it allows you to keep track of it all whilst the job is in progress. So for example, where you've got 4-year-long jobs, this is great because you could have quarterly reports running to show you, where your progress invoicing is going and still capture the actuals on the job.
Yeah, our report shows us job, quoted time of material, extra time of material, bill to date, each invoice, and what.
Exactly right.
What does it do to the general ledger?
Was there a hand over to
Sorry, I'm just...
We'll come back to that one.
Yeah,
It does move the stock around though.
it'll move the stock, but then you're not necessarily allocating the cost, but depending on when, I'm presuming, because I haven't tried this, when you allocate those stock lines to that progress invoice.
And then post.
Yeah, depending on the period, then you may not get your sales and costing in the same period anyway. Is that correct?
Possibly. It is a timing thing, you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure how, with the new particular stock stuff.
From what I've seen in one of the other things is that it posts it, so I might allocate it to a March invoice, but if the stock item came in February, it goes to the February ledger.
Okay, so it does, it's the period that's assigned to the job.
Because if it's allocating to stock at the time, and you've got your posting that
the allocation to the progress invoice is purely within the jobbing ledger, not the financial. Is that correct?
I don't know, sorry.
We'll come in halfway through this.
Yeah.
We'll follow up with that one, Jackie. But good question. Are you going?
I will be ready in about a minute.
Cool. I'll move on then to quoting in jobs. Now, I'm not sure if any of you guys use quoting in jobs. Did you know that it can also be used as a budgeting tool? So it might not actually produce a formal quote that you would present to your client, but you can put in what you expect the job to cost you and do internal budgeting and report upon that as well. So the quote lines are their own little entity in the database. They don't affect your stock, so you can put in whatever you need to put in there to help you report upon what you think you're going to, so quite often when you start a project, you have an idea of the kind of money you think you're going to spend and make on that job. It's really, really hard often to quantify that after the job is done. So this is where you can actually use the budgeting aspect of the quote and budget tabs, not actually presenting a formal quote, although obviously you can, but you can also use it as a budgeting tool for your organisation. Quite often organisations will develop a significant...
Just on that point, the use of the quote budget tab, even if you don't transfer those lines through the cost tab, is really significant in the analysis tab. So you go in and you've got the widgets that produce the graphs and everything like that. That's where you're going to get the best overview of that information in a comparative sense. It's going to give you a bar graph that's got lines for what you quoted, it's got lines for your actuals, and it's got lines for your invoice as well. So you can have a look in there to make sure that that job is tracking, particularly if you've got a long lead time on jobs, so when you set up the budget or the quote against it, then the turnaround might be a few months before it's invoiced, and then costs can fluctuate quite significantly in that period of time. So at that point, you can keep an eye on it, and you can periodically check that tab or run that report, and just keep an eye on how you're actually tracking against what you envisioned this job being worth to you when it was first opened.
Thank you for that, Sarah and Kirsty. Sorry to everyone in Invercargill who I turned this part of the screen sharing off for. I was just quickly setting something up and trying to save you staring a lot of setup screens flash by. As you can see, Jive was actually quite quick to set up because that was from scratch. So Jive is a tool that lets you search through your job costing lines for invoicing at the end of a month. It's really quite great because I've got all these searches here, as you can see on the main screen, that let me see what kinds of jobs I'm going to bring up. And I'm just going to bring up anything that's ready to invoice. I'm just going to select all job statuses. Let's start. Now obviously I'd normally be choosing just jobs that were a bit more specific. I find some here for Paul Holland. So I can click on this job to see what lines that are up. And here are the lines for this job. So I can go through, and the glory of this is that I can say, actually the cost is different, so no, why can I not do that? This is a kit.
Change your criteria to work in progress and reach invoice.
Yeah. Great demo. This is better. So if I look in here, I can see various jobs. Here's one that Sarah set up ready for invoicing earlier. And if I come in here, I can see the unit costs. I can overwrite those if I need to. And same goes for prices. Or I can set a markup percentage to say, well, it's going to be 10% markup. And I can just choose set lines as. So this is a really nice, easy job management tool that gives me the ability to just come in and quickly edit these before I save them. Once I've decided on everything I'm ready for, set lines as ready to invoice. Yep.
And this is where you can pop in and look at all your jobs that are status closed or complete, look at all work in progress or ready to invoice lines, and then within Jive, you can cancel them all, right them off, all the lines on the job. So instead of having to run a report and say, here are my 80 job numbers that I have to go in and deal with active lines, just open Jive, you can filter on the job status criteria, and then like you can just see what Will's doing here, just go on a line-by-line basis, double-click, open it up, and within those lines you can write them off or cancel them or invoice them or whatever needs to happen to them to get them off that job. And then once you put next business alert in, you'll never be able to close a job again with active lines on it. So it doesn't become an increasing problem. You're actually decreasing the extent of the issue as time goes on with the implementation of these tools.
Excellent.
Just a side note as well. Will has demonstrated that we can update the lines individually whilst we're drilling into the job. But what if you've got a collection of jobs, they're all good to go already through other reporting, you can actually select all of the lines and hold down the shift key and it'll actually do groups of lines. And then you can bulk update all of your lines from, say, work in progress and into ready to invoice. Okay, so you can imagine the time that it would take for somebody to go through your timesheet tabs and your cost tabs and go ready to invoice, ready to invoice, ready to invoice, and then actually shift them into invoice and then carry on doing that. Which for some of our clients, for example, I have a client with this, it was a 3-person job and it took them an entire week, literally 7 days to maintain their jobs. Big client. And actually get their invoices out. They installed Drive and it's now 1 person's job and it takes them in a day.
Huge.
Yeah.
On boss.
Yeah, and again, it's not an all or nothing sort of situation. You can use Drive for some of your jobs, like as Tracy said, like the ones that you know all the lines are ready to go, they've been reviewed, and you just want to click a button and invoice them all. Okay. And then there's other ones that might be a bit sticky or tricky that need to be done on an individual basis or using progress invoices and things like that. So there's all these ideas are used in conjunction with each other rather than only one. Yeah. So it's completely flexible.
The one other feature that's not been mentioned in this screen is because this is a nice EXO product, I can drag and drop up here because it's acting as a pivot. And so I could just say, well, actually what I need to group these by the status. I can quickly see all of the statuses grouped together.
Nice.
And you can print them out so they become reports.
Right, so print button sitting right here.
What do you think, folks? Who wants it?
This is an add-on. I think, and I'm not...
This is an add-on, yes.
But I think it's 1495. It's a database license. So that's the initial cost of the product. And from there on in, I think it's $395 a year to kind of... But I'm guessing here. Yeah.
And you'd really only need one.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. Yeah, so it's per database. It's not got nothing to do with the users that are actually using it.
Yeah. So that's a super cool way to streamline your office.
Yeah.
That-
Streamline billing anyway.
Yeah.
As you can see, I can use it for everything from the job management. So I can say I want to attach, detach.
So you can use progress billing as well.
You can use it for purchase billing.
But the costs aren't on the job, you can install progress billing X number of dollars.
There's some complication around the progress billing. We require the quote lines to be set up to become the invoice line. But yeah, we've got ways and
Yeah,
means.
so it's just an adaptation of your process that we have to sort of look at.
But yeah, in terms of getting your invoices out, so do you want to follow up on that? Where it goes from there, or?
So where it goes from here, I can, sorry, just go back to clear my grouping. Vector, lines as
You'll be able to set it up that fast for us.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
You probably want to take slightly more care than I'm taking with motor parts. So after invoicing, I can say these are all finished, but obviously I could choose no change if I don't want to just make a bulk change to every single job. I can set the narratives if I've got a particular, so
Invoice narrative. So this is fantastic to those that are in progress invoicing. Things like that. You can say there's 10% invoice covered from this date range to this date range in regards to this purchase order, so on and so forth. You know, so if you narrow down your search to do that billing, then within Drive you can have that narration on your invoice and it will post on your invoice. Each data transactions. So And it's for every invoice. So you can imagine where you would normally key this in or write this text in the narrative for each invoice as you generate them. This will do it for all of them in one fell swoop.
Can you put wildcards in there to bring something in from like a merge?
No, it's just straight keys.
As the narrative field is really, because it can't use text and things like that in that field.
So I'm sure I want to continue. I'm going to say yes. Here we go, invoicing to jobs.
Obviously, there'll be a lot of jobs with work in progress lines.
And now I can print a review.
Just go into your,
Yeah, so from that point onwards, you go back into EXO. Business, sorry.
that's not there. You have to run it off C. Because you text it to,
I did.
yeah, EXO workshop. Oh, it's complicated.
I'm so good at clicking on buttons, as you can all see.
So the process from this point onwards would become to reports.
Yep.
As long as your data is all set up correctly, with emailing and printing, you can run it off through your invoice batch printing, and that will generate your mail shot invoice emailed out or your printed ones. Depending on what you've got set up. Done. Yep.
Except of course I'm having trouble finding invoices.
Date range.
It'll be my date range.
So you can in Jive also pick the date that the invoice is generated for. You know, so if you have a weekly cycle or something like that that you bill out, or a daily billing, then you can use Jive for that. Or if you have a monthly cycle or whatever, you know, because obviously in the many jobbing businesses it's not generally a monthly billing thing. You do the work, put the time and materials against it, close up your job. So you can be running Jive daily to run through this really quickly. Especially if you've got teams of guys working and you want to get those invoices out quick.
There we go. Nice easy mail shot.
So if you're not familiar with the mail shot screen, we would definitely recommend becoming familiar with it. It's great for invoicing, it's great for statements, probably more common, particularly if your invoicing process currently is on a job-by-job basis and you're just emailing the invoice off the job. You possibly don't use the bulk invoice sending tool, but we can use a similar one for statements and also creditor remittances as well if your creditors require those things.
So the email and print settings come off the debtor or off the creditor if you're doing creditor remittances, and you get the primary email.
You don't to confirm each email screen, is it?
No.
Not unless it's your very first one.
Yeah. But then once you've got all your settings set up, you can just click go, and it'll just tip through the list and it'll change. It'll put a little tick in the done column once it's sent, and then it will just appear as an item in your sent items in your Outlook.
And just in case you didn't know, you can manually overwrite those email addresses or add email addresses in there. You know, so if you've got a person in there that might get it differently this week because the other person's away sick or something like that, and they've informed you of this, then you can edit that.
And one thing good is I use the email status and it's got the nasty bit of picking up generally if there's a contact loaded in this.
Yes, the default contact.
As opposed to the default email on the data screen. So quite often it'll be going off to a sales contact or an IT guy or the MD or whatever, but really should be going to the accounts.
Can you set the statement contact on the unit?
Statement.
Yeah, so
So you can set a different default for that, and that's where you would input.
Should it not just automatically pick up the default email?
Possibly. There is one, yeah.
It's just one of the hierarchies within the system in terms of where it gets its information from.
So
We use
what
Skype,
it's
because on our front screen, that's who gets to give you a lot of head office branch type data. So the branch wants the invoice, but they've got it signed off,
Yeah.
sent to the HO, but HO gets the statement. So on our front screen, we're using the invoice, what we call the invoice address, and on the details too, is where we send the statement.
That is,
That's the way it works.
what Tony was asking about, just in case everyone not here couldn't hear, was when you're using a mail shot, it will default to your default contact rather than to the email on the front page of the data screen, which, as was mentioned, it's actually supposed to be using the statement contact from the screen. So if you set it in here, it will be exactly who you set it to. Otherwise, it will use the default contact if there is one, or if there's no default contact, it will come from this email box. Unfortunately, that's a limitation. We could request a change to MYOB, but I don't think they will be changing the exact inheritance on that screen.
If it gets enough votes.
If it gets enough votes, yeah. So what I recommend for anyone who is having that problem is that, I know what Focus does, we have an accounts address that we've set for absolutely every company we deal with, and then your statement contact is Cobalt, accounts Cobalt, and then it just goes to whoever that is.
Thanks, Will.
And that information we can, if you provide it to us in a CSV format, can upload it automatically into the system with the parameters around it. So we can speed that process up for you if you wish.
Right, folks, it's just a little up to midday. We've got a couple more slides, I think, to deal with.
I don't think so.
Cost types and cost groups, grade and asset.
Yep.
Quickly run through those, and then we'll just hand it across to the Q&A.
Not quite sure we
I'm not so sure we need the slide right now.
So you're back at slide
Okay.
page 13.
Oh, miles ago. What I'll do is I'll shut that down. I feel like such a midget standing in front of this. Take me seriously. Okay, cost types and cost groups. Now, many people with job costing don't know that there is even cost types and cost groups. Does anybody know about them here? You do? You do? Nobody else?
Okay. Uneducated audience.
Brilliant. That's exactly what we're after. Okay, just trying to find job costing here. Okay, so cost type and a cost group. Essentially, they are reporting tools, and they give you the ability to identify the lines on a job. So they're set up. They can be user set up, so they're not very difficult to set up. And here you come within job costing, and you can see cost groups and cost types. And basically what they can be used for, well, they can be used for anything really, and I do have clients who use them for some quite interesting things, especially if they have time track, because we actually grab them and use them to do clever costing and pricing of things. But just within EXO, they can be a very good way of breaking down the lines on a job. Okay, so here, for example, we've got professional services, workshop expenses, and disbursements. If we come into these, we can copy from the quote lines, and we can identify and group in our quote also by these cost types and cost groups. So in our actual formal, document that we might send our client and things like that, we can identify those lines and group them into our reports. So under this, we've got disbursements. Under here, we've got our professional services. Under here, we've got this. And our cost types can be automated to pick up markups. They can have overheads. They can belong to a general ledger. And if I can expand that out, it can fire off or belong to a cost group, for example. So delivery might always be a disbursement. If we come into a job, put that down, and I'm using someone else's database.
I've just EQC around our house this morning, so I might be in the market for a new house.
Okay, so for example, in here we can associate the lines on the quote against a cost type and a cost group if they're turned on here. So we can say this is labour and this is labour for our professional services, but if it wasn't for professional services, but actually our workshop, now we're getting reporting that makes sense. Okay? But not only that, if you're keen in your timesheets or your materials on your costs tab, so just in case you don't understand the difference between the two, timesheets is your labour. Okay? All your labour should hit your timesheets. Or your materials should hit your costs. Okay, so they're two quite distinct functions. They do the same thing, they all end up invoiced, but when you're trying to track the difference between the two, and in lots of reporting and lots of external products, they will identify them as two quite separate things. Because in a jobbing industry, they are two quite separate things. So in here, your timesheets, they can also belong to what the guy has actually done, depending on the kind of work. So if you're in an industry where you might have your guys work across multiple branches, for example, or you might have divisions and guys can work across those divisions, you can identify their labour and their material and use your cost types and cost groups to be your division identifier. Okay, so if, for example, he works in professional services generally, but we've pulled him in to do the workshop stuff because the other guy was way sick, you can identify the labour that he has done for that and report upon that.
Yeah, and that allows you to assign any cost related to that back over to the correct division. That's something that we've just set up for quite complex set of reports for a customer, where that happens a lot. The staff are in a workshop and they sometimes are on, you know, one machine or another machine that's all set up as divisions, and we've got it tagged where if the job line goes to a certain division, then it pre-populates a journal for them to move the wage costs to that division as well, just for that portion of time.
So set cost types or cost groups can have, again, it's one of those really simple features that job costing have given us, but our clients grab it and run with it with lots of customization. My example is where, you know, their job costing and all of the extra fields and things like that are working perfectly for them. What they couldn't do is capture the payroll integration. So they didn't integrate with an EXO payroll, they integrated with an external one. So what they did is they had the client would be charged was the normal labour rate, but what the guy would get paid for overtime and other penal rates was housed in their job costing in cost groups and cost types. Okay, and then they would produce a report out of job costing that they would then key into their payroll system based on that. So you can imagine if you've got quite a different payroll system, and admittedly this client's Australian, they have a load of penal rates that they have to meet, offshore work, overnight work, all those sorts of things, which New Zealand, especially now with all of our new rules coming in, we're having to meet as well in our payroll systems. You know, they've used that information from cost types and cost groups, so that's really strong tool. So
can I quickly show everyone something? I know
We're running out of time.
We're running out of time, but we'll just put through it really quickly because it's something that I've showed a couple of customers recently and they found it to be quite amazing. So if you're purchasing on a job-by-job basis, so the stock that you buy in is only for a particular job, within this quote budget tab, you can go back here. We can enter all the stock items that you want. You want some of those. You want some of these. And we just go down and obviously we've got suppliers set against all of these stock items. Once we do that, I've got this copy to column, and if you hit P for purchase order, there, and save, one of these buttons here, this one, generate purchase orders. So that will generate the purchase orders to all the different suppliers for those stock items that you purchased, and it will insert it into there so that when you receipt the stock in, it comes in tagged with the job number and goes directly against the job. Now most of you will be doing that, but you might be manually keying that job number against purchase orders and lines when they come in. This automates the entire process, and it's just another step in the smoothing of your business processes. So just thought I'd quickly just talk about that. Yeah, and it's all just puts it into the purchases tab here. So as they progress, all this, they just move from. Oh yeah. Just in here.
Don't know
take
that.
out order number.
Yeah, yeah.
Because it's disappeared off the warrant, so.
Oh, interesting. Check that out. But anyway, so that's a we feature that's by default in every EXO job costing system that you might not be aware of that can really speed up and increase the accuracy of that. Now we're on to questions.